Well, thank you for joining us today. Let's start with some introductions. My name's Nicole. I'm a realtor with Mile High Modern and the founder of Denver Vibe. This is my business partner.
I'm Antoinette, also with Mile High Modern and Denver Vibe.
Steve Scribner, a Shape Architecture Studio in Denver. We specialize in high performance passive house homes.
Morgan Law, Shape Architecture.
Awesome. Thank you guys for being with us today in this beautiful home. We are on 3591 South Ogden and want to learn more about a passive home.
So our audience probably has a wide range of knowledge of what passive homes are. Can you just first describe what that is?
It's an energy and comfort standard, promotes a 90% reduction in energy use in the building, and also has extreme elements of comfort, acoustic separation that are natural and mechanical ventilation. And what that means is that you get constant filtered fresh air in the house, much better thermal comfort than most other homes, and a reduction in your overall energy use over the year.
Awesome.
And add to that, it's actually super healthy. So for instance, right here, we're sitting next to 285, an 8-lane highway on a hill where there's a lot of engine braking and a lot of acceleration, a lot of exhaust. And because there's continuous fresh air, ventilated fresh air in the home all the time, the air we're breathing is extremely healthy. And compared to a conventional home where air would be filtered through the cracks in the walls that it's sort of seeping through. So you get all that exhaust plus maybe some insulation bits.
So even houses a couple doors down are breathing really, toxic air, whereas this one's right next to it and it's completely clean air.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating.
And Denver actually does not have great air quality overall. It sort of ranks low in cities in the US.
And I know with passive homes, like the health component's a big part of it, and a big part of that just the quality of the air. What other elements are a part of the design process and that you're thinking of that contribute to the health of a home?
So the interesting thing about passive house compared to, for instance, LEED or other performance guidelines is that it's actually almost like a building code, and you actually have to do an energy model as you do the design. So you sort of build the house virtually and then calculate how much energy is used and lost. And not only that, but what the comfort is going to be inside. So windows have to meet a certain comfort standard. So if it's 0 degrees out and say 70 in and you're right next to a window, that window is going to be above 60 degrees. So you're not going to feel the kind of cold coming off it. And that's part of the standard. And then what's great about the energy modeling process is that after you complete the design and it's built, passive houses always perform completely aligned with the energy model that was put into it. So this house is using as much energy as was designed to use. Whereas a lot of the other standards are a little bit more guesswork and they don't necessarily always perform the same way as they were designed. Because we're looking at one thing called thermal bridges, which is secret passageways for heat to get to the outside, through say steel beams or other kind of structural elements, cantilevered balconies, etc., can let a lot of heat out. And so that means the performance of those buildings isn't the same as what the model performance is. Whereas with a passive house, it is. And then people, when they're in passive houses, actually they're like, wow, it feels different between the quietness from exterior noise, the natural lights. As you can see, it's like very light right here and there are no lights on. And that was really part of careful design to make sure, again, here we're on 285, we didn't want a lot of south-facing windows, but we needed the heat that comes with the light from the south. So we have the central 3-story sort of staircase window well that brings light like very deep into the house while keeping us really comfortable. There's no glare, and there's no heat loss. There's the right amount of heat gain, winter, not the summer.
I think there's a misconception too on passive homes from the 70s or 80s that, just have these big walls of glass that in the houses would heat up quickly and dramatically and then cool off a lot because it has a wall of glass on it. Where you can see compared to this house, there's relatively little glass in the south and we're not relying on that as much. Shading is also an important part of that to keep the house comfortable and stable throughout the day and throughout the year. So I think that's an important thing. And then typically when we design these houses, we're not relying on some big mechanical system that can ramp up and ramp down. It's a third the mechanical system, it's a third the sun, and it's a third the people and the internal gains and the equipment inside the house. So those three things are what powers the house. And you can tell right now, I mean, the mechanical system is not even on, right? Because we have basically 2 out of the 3 going right now, and that's enough to condition the space. The other fantastic thing about it too is that it's able to weather temporary outages much better, just due to the thermal mass, the increased insulation. So when we get these temporary power outages, this home can basically maintain the temperature for as opposed to a couple hours, it's more like a couple days.
Wow.
And that's especially true if you have a party in here, like start increasing the occupant load, and then it'll stay warmer even longer.
So we'll all flock here for power outages.
Exactly.
Have another party.
Totally. Exactly.
It's not hypothetical. We have another passive house that was completed, and the owners are living in it now. It was a couple years ago, and they've had a temporary issue with their mechanical system, and it's hard to get mechanical contractors. So it's been a couple of months. They literally have had no heat, and their temperature has been staying between 67 and 71 degrees,
Wow.
with zero heating and cooling.
Exactly.
And that's because we designed it with the right amount of south-facing glass, and it was it's just an efficient, fairly simple design. So it really works, and that's, thinking long-term about the potential climate disruption or change. Having something that you don't even have to power to be comfortable in is we see it as kind of a mandate we bring that to all of our work.
I know you guys have talked a lot about it's socially responsible too, given what we're looking at with the climate. But I love what you're talking about with just that exchange of when you approach a site, you're having to look at how will this house work and just connect with the neighbors and take or work with the neighborhood and community. But also I love what you're talking about just with the people in the homes also have that exchange within the home itself. So it's just a much more bigger way of thinking of design within a community versus just one house and what that design is.
Well, what do you guys think is your favorite feature of the home?
I think the kind of open stairwell that connects all the spaces and just kind of floods the whole house with light, and creates these really nice views out, but it still feels completely cozy and protected over here, especially kind of close to the road. So I think on these kind of tight urban lots where privacy can be an issue, it's a good way to get a nice quality of light in the space without compromising privacy issues.
And then another sort of trick we did is on this unit, we have a skylight that actually brings light in through the 3rd floor party deck into the 2nd floor master bath. And it's you can see it when you walk in, it makes this really even light. There's no glare, but the sort of magic light coming from, I think that was one of the design features we were really excited about trying. And we were really excited that the builder Peter agreed to do it and tried it, and that it's actually very successful.
It's beautiful in there.
And I can't help but wanting to add the party deck
Yeah.
on the roof. Is just it really does frame the mountains really, really wonderfully. Again, something that we couldn't really tell before the building was built to see how that design was going to work out, and it worked out really well. And it also, because the roof to that deck is open, it brings light into the party room on the 3rd floor, which could be an office, it could be a lounge, game room, kids playroom, family room, but always that's going to have that great natural light and the views to the mountains as well as the access to that.
You were just talking about the roof, how it's set up and how other homes work when we have snow melt. So do you want to elaborate on just the uniqueness of the roof lines?
Sure, yeah. So it's a pair of gables next to each other, so pitched roofs. And between them, that makes it a valley, which is something that's a really good idea to avoid on typical construction, because at those locations where there might be a valley, typically heat will come out of the house through the roof, and it will melt snow. And then if it's cold out, that snow will refreeze and form ice and ice dams, which can be a problem for long-term maintenance, durability. But because it's a passive home, this insulation thickness is so great that roof surface is always cold. So in winter, when it's cold out, the snow is not going to melt. And it's only going to melt on warmer days when the sun is melting it, and it can drain into the gutter. So we should not be seeing any maintenance issues with that. But it's just another thing with the passive house, making sure we're also being careful about not having steel or something that would sneak the warm air through the envelope.
So we touched on this earlier, just common misconceptions about passive homes. So can you explain, because I think some people get confused. We've heard some clients talk about not knowing the difference between passive solar and solar. So can you describe that a little bit more in depth and how that plays out here?
Well, again, yeah, it's a different approach than the older approach to passive solar homes. It's increased insulation. A lot of people actually, get bogged down by that or confused by that, and there's really not that much insulation in this house, right? I mean, a big part of it is the form factor, and the geometry is relatively simple, and where you kind of lose energy is too many corners or jogs, or you see these houses that have all these bump outs and things, and it's really tough from a energy standpoint when dealing with that sort of geometry. There's basically a couple inches of insulation on the outside of these walls, but it's pretty typical. It's 2x6 wall and very standard stuff. So I guess that would be the first element of it.
And I think the fact that it's a duplex helps a lot, because energy is sneaking through this wall a little bit. We have really high performance windows, so there's 3 panes of glass, whereas a typical new window is double pane and classic windows are single pane. And then even more importantly, where the panes meet the wall is actually where these windows, the science and the technology comes into the quality of these windows. So no air is leaking through, and then no heat is sneaking through, and that's really important. And then back to the duplex, heat is leaving this way, and a little bit through the roof, as we talked about, not very much, but no heat is getting lost that direction, and that's a large amount of surface area. So that right there helps a lot. So it's another social argument, increasing density, also increasing efficiency.
Mm-hmm. I think another big difference is to get certified, there's an air tightness requirement, which means the house is like a super tight envelope, right? Mm-hmm. And so as opposed to something like LEED or something where you're filling out these checklists, that air tightness is the responsibility of the builder. Mm-hmm. So historically, that's why we've seen a lot of builders interested in the standard, because they have to actually up their game and get this super small requirement of air infiltration into the house. So that obviously is another element of a passive home versus a passive solar home, in that all of a sudden now you have this really tight envelope box, right? There's no air coming in or out. So that's why we introduced the mechanical ventilation that filters the fresh air, that's constantly supplying air into the living spaces and extracting it from the bathrooms and the kitchen. Mm-hmm. So there's this kind of constant flow that's creating this fresh air into the space, and helping to deal with that tight envelope. Another thing people get confused about is operable windows. We hear that we'd like a passive house, but we like to open our windows, which is it's another kind of misunderstanding about the standard. You'll see throughout this house, most of the windows are operable.
Mm-hmm. They're required to be by passive houses too.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And it's great. It might overheat a little bit in the afternoon with a window. It's part of people's emotional comfort.
Right.
First on this out on 285, you might open less than you might somewhere else.
It's just too bad they built the road there, right when you were building this beautiful home.
But you know what? It's great because
you have the fresh air. I swear it only takes 5 minutes to be in this home and feel like my respiratory system is normal instead of like you were saying, Denver air quality is not great, and so I love spending time in here. It's just, you can feel healthier while you sit here, so it'd be a great place to live.
Another weird thing people experience in passive houses is that they actually maintain their temperature throughout the day and night. Right, so most of us are used to turning down our thermostat at night, trying to save energy, and we just throw extra blankets on. It's cold, and our house kind of goes up and down. And when you sleep in these houses, it's so weird. You wake up in the middle of the night, it's still 70 degrees and the heat's not on. And so
that's so lovely. That contributes to comfort in the home versus sacrificing comfort to sleep better.
Well, we are in the middle of winter, but how does the AC cooling, if we're in the middle of summer and we have the sun coming in, can you speak a little more to that efficiency and how that works?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing is that in the summer, when it's hot, the sun is higher in the sky, so you get a lot less energy coming in through the windows. And that's part of what we do as passive home designers, is really think about where there's going to be shade on surfaces and when, and really specifically through the seasons. And so
that deciduous tree out there was actually put into the energy model, obviously, because it complements the building depending on the season.
I love that tree, especially when we were shooting the photos right at like the fall. It was so orange and beautiful and yellow. It was like, this is good job on the tree. Looks beautiful.
Deciduous trees are basically the best shading devices that could ever have been designed. So Mother Nature did amazingly because they allow a lot of heat in the winter and not in the summer. The other thing is that the heating system, it's all an all-electric house, and there's what's called mini split heat pumps in the home as heating and cooling, and they do both heating and cooling super efficiently. Basically, if you put in 1 unit of electricity energy, you get 3 to 4 units of heating and cooling out. So that's more than 3 times as efficient as the most efficient boiler for conventional, or even many more times more efficient than a gas furnace. And then but they're also very quiet, they have variable speed. And this house has 3 of those units, which are the smallest that are available on the market. And that's still more energy than is required for this whole home by a factor of like more than 2. Like that's more, because you can't even buy in America a unit small enough for a passive house, but they're very efficient even at, if they're not operating at full capacity. Again, conventional systems, you kind of have they like cycle, they're either on or they're off. But they do great for cooling.
It also work great if you were to, both of these homes could have solar panels installed relatively easily, right? And like with a few panels, basically, you could be net zero over the course of the year.
Yeah, I think you had mentioned that, it was that the amount of solar panels required also is significantly less than on a standard home.
Oh my God.
Or even a lead home, right?
And your question was the difference between passive solar and solar.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's like the classic understanding of like a solar home, but then active solar, photovoltaic panels, is usually people's first like go-to sustainability measure. But it's actually, they take a fair amount of energy to produce. So true sustainability comes from not needing energy. And then the backup to that is to put on solar panels. So we often do net zero homes, and it starts with the passive house approach, and then adding solar panels as needed, which is a lot fewer, especially in a climate. We have a really great climate here for this because there's a lot of sun. Yep. And so and also because the homes are so tight, it gets really cold at night and really warm by day. And those kind of average out to a great temperature. And so because it keeps all that heat in, it works really well with that. If it were to stay negative 20 for 2 weeks and it was gray all day.
Different conversation, yeah.
It'd just be more difficult. The question of how much one saves from having a passive home is it actually impossible to answer. And that's partly because right now, gas prices are really cheap. So comparing all electric to gas is so favorable per unit of energy, but that's not long-term thinking. And this home, for instance, does not have solar panels, but once you have solar panels and you don't, the south unit could be net zero, the north unit presumably would not be able to meet that. But net zero meaning you spend $0 on electricity, except for cooking, basically.
Yeah, I think another way to think about it is I've talked to some friends who work in finance about this because we get that question all the time, and it's like really hard, right? It really depends on the size of the house, the location, so many different things. But the way that I've heard it described to me from someone smarter than me is like you are kind of taking that money that you would be spending on your utilities every month, and you're moving that over to your mortgage payment. So there's an increase in cost. But, when you go to sell that house or, at the end of the mortgage, you have a much more resilient home that will last a lot longer than a typical house. So, I think it's price-wise, it's kind of a wash. I mean, you're either giving it to utilities or you're investing it in your mortgage. And, for most of us, the latter would make sense. And then I think that also doesn't really talk to the health benefits that you're getting throughout that investment. So is it worthwhile if you're going to own the house for a year? No. Is it worth it if you're going to own the house for 5 or 10 years? Definitely.
I think even a year to be in this fresh air every day would be fabulous. But
and there's the intangibles, like the way we're going and what people value. Like we know in real estate, people are going to value a healthier home. A home that you don't have to replace the mechanicals or like just beautiful design that sustains the test of time. And so I think there's a huge value there, and people will pay for that because people understand it. And more, I think people are going to see more passive homes here and understand that and see that value. And so it's kind of intangible now, but like we're going that direction more and more.
Yeah, absolutely.
People, I think, see passive house as a sort of niche, sort of nerdy approach to, houses that are for those people that want to sacrifice themselves for the environment. Mm-hmm. But it's the opposite. It's a way to make a more comfortable house that has more pleasant daylight, better acoustics, better, and the health benefits are not quantifiable, but really real and really profound. Mm-hmm. Major impacts on society at a societal level. And the durability. This house is a 200 plus year house, and nothing built between 1950 and 1990 can say that. Mm-hmm. There is mold in every wall in all of the new condos that have gone up, at least 20 years ago, mm-hmm. because of the building practices. And so having all of those things combined are why we do this. We do care about the environment. Maybe that's why we got into got trained, but it's not actually the reason that people should do it. It's a benefit that's on top. Mm-hmm. And then especially, again, thinking long term, in 30 years, our gas prices can be what they are right now. In 30 years, the price of solar panels can be what they are right now. One's going up, the other's going down. And so I think it's like thinking about your investment and then adding to that, state and national and local incentives for sustainability measures, which are getting to be pretty substantial.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And our understanding, like the city of Denver really wants everyone to go electric in the long term. So better to be ahead of that curve than like at the end of it and looking for stuff to replace and just reconfiguring a whole system in a house.
Yeah, I think in like 2015, whatever, we started, passive house was this really weird niche thing that was going on. And like at this point, Excel Energy is offering $45,000 rebate for homes for the Marshall Fire victims if they go to the passive house standard. So it's being adopted on a much wider level.
Yeah, and that is very substantial.
And they're doing that for an economic reason. They are not doing that because they want to save the world.
Right.
They want to because they're concerned about building infrastructure so they want to reduce people's energy consumption. Mm-hmm. And so it has ripple effects that scale really dramatically.
Mm-hmm. I think what you guys have done here is create this really unique, beautiful, it's beyond beautiful. Like there's so many, up-leveled finishes and the triple pane windows and, all the health benefits. But I guess what else would you want to say about it being right next to 285?
Well, first of all, shout out to Peter Stewart for doing an amazing job with all those.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Unbelievable contractor.
Yeah.
And his vision right from the beginning, it's completely aligned with everything we've been talking about. But I think he saw the potential in this lot that no one else would have seen. And he also thought it was like an amazing design challenge. Mm-hmm. Because only with our passive house building science experience could we take something that is just like an obnoxiously loud location and stinky and make it into something as comfortable and quiet and peaceful. And it really was through this sort of like architectural strategies of we need a lot of south light for our passive solar, but we're going to design that in a way that's not where the operable windows are and where it can bring light all throughout the house. Mm-hmm. And we also need a stair. So we were able to do it without really sacrificing really making the architectural design even more exciting.
And what an amazing contribution to the community, because there's new builds up and down this block that haven't thought through those elements, and you would hear sound more, or you would not have the same quality of air. And instead of someone just doing something here that didn't take those things into account, like you're just contributing to the neighborhood with beautiful architecture, a healthy home, and I don't know.
All those elements would be ideal for resale. That they're things people don't know until we talk about them. So that's why we're talking about that.
Sounds like we're talking loudly, but we're not.
No, not at all.
We'd be shouting to hear each other.
Yeah.
in that house across Ogden there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's a relatively small lot too, so I think even just like a connection outdoors, like we have here, and how we have on all the levels and the stair, like it really helps lessen the need to feel like you need to be outside, which is obviously louder. So I think that like creating that connection and in a lot of the gathering spaces is pretty important.
Yes, yeah, absolutely nailed that goal. It's beautiful, and all of everywhere that you would gather in the home, so much light, so comfortable. It feels really nice. I mean, the rooftop deck is probably my favorite thing. There's so many things I love about them. I love the south-facing window and the stairs, and again, Peter did such an incredible job with that finish level. But we also love how the A-frame frames the mountain view perfectly west-facing, and you kind of sit up a little higher than how the other homes are they kind of go down the hill a little bit more, so you have such a great view.
Just for our viewers, our listeners, if they're interested in this and they either wanted to build their own or find that right house, specifically if they want to build their own, like where should they start?
Talk to Peter Stewart.
I'm gonna buy this house actually.
But I feel like you have to probably be thoughtful in the lot and the site, and that will contribute to the look of the home. And what I love too is that you're not going to have cookie cutter homes. You're going to have unique homes that make a more interesting neighborhood when there's eclectic homes, eclectic design. And my understanding is you have to be very thoughtful about the home, how the house would sit, and that contributes to what it's going to look like. So
Yeah.
I need to start by talking to you guys, talking to Peter, but any other just like thoughts of how to get started?
Well, I would say just to thank you for the compliments, and we do, that's why we're here, is we love creating the best solution for any given site. And the home I referenced earlier that is mechanical, that has only passive heating right now, is much more sort of a not contemporary design. It fits right into this sort of more traditional neighborhood. So we can, there's no particular design style. And I think that's another misconception people have. I don't want it to look like that. But I think the other thing to say is that there are a lot of resources. Emu Systems was the passive house consultant on this project, and they are an amazing local resource. They're sort of the national leader in training builders, but they also do consulting. And the other thing that's really amazing about what they do is they do a lot of sort of work to change laws. They've done white papers, they've worked with ASHRAE, which is sort of on the technical side, to try to educate people in, and I think that's part of the reasons we're seeing these changes. They worked with Excel to educate them, which has led to this rebate. So, but people can reach out to them. They're very approachable if they're interested in more about passive house. Obviously, reach out to us or reach out to Peter, but that's just another resource.
Yeah, and they have homeowners taking their course all the time, and so they're basically unleashing this army of like certified professionals and architects, builders, homeowners, engineers. So,
and I will say I'm LEED certified, LEED AP. I've dabbled in the WELL standard. I'm interested, done research on the Living Building Challenge, but passive house sticks once you do the buildings, because it's building science. It's not a checklist. And so once you learn it, even homeowners that take EMU's course and they really do it and understand it, no one ever goes back. Because once you realize it's really simple stuff. It actually is. There's science to it, and there's math you have to do that's not easy math, but it's not complicated. There's only like 5 kind of basic things you have to hit. And so once you realize that everyone should do this, like we do non-certified projects for different reasons, but we really never let go of the underlying building science and high performance sort of like approach. Because why should we? It doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. It has so much value.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point we said. There's like, as opposed to LEED or something where you're following this checklist and there's a very prescriptive way to reach the certification. With passive house, there's a couple metrics you have to hit, but how you get there is completely up to you. And so I think especially from like a designer and builder perspective, that really opens up some different opportunities on how to get there, whether it's better windows or better mechanical system. You know, you can really kind of do those trade-offs to figure out the most efficient, affordable way to get there if certification is what you're going for.
And I know we've touched on the different components, but can you just quickly review the 5 components you're referencing?
So first is super insulation. So it just needs to be, and it's again based on the energy model. There's no number you have to hit. In this house, because it's got such a great ratio of walls to area, it's not very much extra insulation. Second is called thermal bridge free design. So that means there's no steel beams that go from inside to outside. Third is really high quality, high performance windows that have good orientation, which we've already talked about a lot. Fourth is mechanical ventilation. So the incoming cold air passes by the outgoing warm air. Air tightness. That is the fastest way to lose energy. And that's actually the cheapest thing to do. For custom homes, it's a no-brainer. It creates such a great collaborative team. You know, working with the energy modeler, the mechanical design, the builder. You know, really, you can't pull off a passive house without the builder having drank the Kool-Aid, as we say. Being 100% committed from the beginning, and understanding it and being excited about it. And then the homeowner too. You know, the final end user has to believe and be interested. And then it's more fun for everyone.
That was one of my questions is, do you guys have an ideal buyer for these homes? Do you have someone in mind that you think makes sense for them?
I would say a chain smoking, like anti-sustainability, anti-environmental
Get them to switch their
politician.
So one of our first projects in Denver wasn't certified, but it was all the same principles we've been talking about here. And they really had no interest or understanding of energy efficiency or sustainability. They bought it based on the aesthetics, which is cool, but then they completely fell in love with the house, and they were just like enamored by the comfort throughout the day and night, and they're like shocked that they weren't paying like hundreds of dollars a month. And so somehow they really didn't grasp what they were getting in terms of the extra benefits of it. But yeah, I mean, we've, since 2015, we've seen a lot of people happy with these houses, so it's cool.
But yeah, changing minds is the best thing we can do. Getting people excited that wouldn't have been excited, because there's plenty of people on the bandwagon. Those aren't the people that we need.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense.
And as it's an abstract concept until you spend some time in one of them and get to enjoy the benefits. So.
Yeah, so nice.
I love it, a chain smoking politician. We have a new target market.
They're not hard to find.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys for the time. Yeah, is there anything else you want to share with us? Final thoughts?
The more people we can reach, the better.
Yeah.
Because I think it's caught on the East Coast, starting to catch on the West Coast, and Colorado is the next frontier that's going to emanate out for the center part of the country. We're at the forefront, and it's of vital importance for the health and just quality of life of the whole area of Colorado, not just the Metro Denver. We need to reduce the amount of smog that we see, have healthier air, and that comes from not burning fossil fuels in our buildings. And I think it's for the occupants' comfort, it's for the greater community. And then the more people start to see it as mainstream, the more it can become mainstream and become something people aren't afraid of or just see as too expensive for them. And, and I hate to compare to Europe because not everyone thinks that that's the ideal society, but passive house level of quality of construction and thoughtfulness is sort of it's taken on an ability to lower energy usage as a continent is absolutely vital. And we see that with the war in Ukraine. It's not negotiable, it's not optional. So the more small scale we can start to have people see the benefits of building a better way, it's a better future.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is we try to tell people if in 2022, 23, if you have the resources to either hire an architect and design a new house, or buy a new house, like you have a responsibility to do it as sustainable as possible. You know, and so that's pretty critical for us, and I think that's important for people to consider that are in that position.
My home was built in the 1880s or 90s, so I have plenty of fresh air. I mean, it's smoggy number here, but it's still, it's fresher than, there's no mold, right? Because everything can dry. It's Colorado, everything can dry both ways, right? There's nothing preventing that. But once, you know, starting in the early 2000s, codes required a vapor barrier on the inside face of walls, which is great. It keeps moisture from getting in the walls, but it doesn't let moisture out of the wall once it's in, and that is a recipe for mold growth. So basically, building codes mandated mold growth starting in the late 90s. And so all of the condos built in, you know, the last 20 to 30 years are worse for health than things that were built before that. And so it's a major problem. Now code is starting to require fresh air ventilation, but it's not always being enforced or implemented or picked up. I think in Denver it is. But that's a really, I hate to say it, scary fact. But it's something that, you know, Enrico from Emo Systems, who I talked about, I gave a presentation with him at the EIA about durability, just durability about passive house, not the energy benefits. And some slides he showed of mold that was uncovered in houses that was after energy retrofits. Older homes increased their airtightness and put in better windows, and then they got mold issues. So it's really important to do these things together and always have continuous mechanical ventilation.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, thank you.